From carrying the banner of British MMA to redefining what UFC commentary could look like, Dan Hardy spent over a decade constructing something inside the organization that most fighters never achieve: real, lasting trust. Then, almost overnight, it was gone. To this day, the full picture of what unfolded behind closed doors remains murky. Here's how more than 10 years of loyalty to the UFC was unraveled by a single breaking point. Dan Hardy never claimed a UFC title, but that hardly made him irrelevant. He was a beloved fighter and, more critically, a valuable asset for the organization. A cornerstone of the UFC's mid-2000s blueprint was taking the brand international, pushing past the American market into new territory. GSP had already opened the door to Canada, and Brazilian legends like Anderson Silva and Big Nog became the faces of the Latin American expansion. The acquisition of Pride gave the promotion a foothold in Asia. Every new market needed its flag bearers, and when the UFC set its sights on British fans, the Outlaw stepped up in a big way. There was a playfulness to Hardy's trash talk, something that felt more like banter than genuine hostility, which stood in contrast to Bisping's sharper edge. He became a fixture at UK events, a reliable presence on the undercard, doing the kind of heavy lifting that doesn't always make headlines but always matters. Becoming a fan favorite came naturally to him. The Red Mohawk, the Outlaw nickname, he looked like every millennial's version of a cool guy brought to life. His fighting style only added to his appeal. He brought crisp striking and legitimate knockout power to every bout, but what audiences remember above all else was his toughness. His lone title shot against Georges St. Pierre is a perfect example. What people took away from that fight wasn't just the Canadian's dominance, but Hardy's extraordinary refusal to quit. Losing a world title fight to one of the most accomplished champions in the sport's history wasn't a death sentence for his career. He was young, capable, and seemingly on track for another opportunity. But fate had other plans. The very quality that defined him, his heart, would soon betray him. After the GSP defeat, Hardy dropped 3 straight, and while he clawed back 2 wins, including a stunning KO against Duane Ludwig, his competitive career was approaching an invisible wall.
I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks, and I definitely don't give a fuck what Dan Hardy thinks.
He signed to fight Matt Brown in April 2013, a bout that had all the ingredients for a barn burner. It never happened. A routine pre-fight screening by the California State Athletics flagged something unexpected. An EKG revealed a condition called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. Hardy had never shown a single symptom, but the risk was very real. The disorder can cause the heart to beat erratically under stress, making high-intensity athletic competition a potential trigger for cardiac arrest. Looking back, it's almost poetic. The relentless heart that made him one of the sport's most magnetic fighters was the same one forcing him out of competition. But retirement wasn't an immediate certainty, and the UFC explored every possible avenue. The problem was that no real workaround existed. Without full medical clearance, the commission wouldn't sanction him to fight, and undergoing open heart surgery for a condition with 0 symptoms is an enormously difficult choice to ask of anyone. With the competitive path effectively closed, the organization offered him a new role entirely. The UFC's global expansion meant a packed calendar and a growing demand for commentary talent. Joe Rogan alone couldn't cover everything. Hardy was brought on as a commentator and analyst, making his broadcast debut at a Fight Night event in London. From there, he became a consistent presence on European cards, and as it turned out, he was exceptional at it. His in-fight analysis revealed a mind that was as sharp on the mic as it was deep in fight knowledge. His chemistry with lead broadcaster John Anik was genuine, and the two became the UFC's first dedicated international commentary team. That partnership also gave rise to one of the sport's finest pieces of content, Inside the Octagon, an early MMA analysis show where Hardy and Anik broke down upcoming cards with a level of depth the sport hadn't quite seen before. It was a massive success. As the years passed, Hardy's potential return to fighting became an increasingly distant thought. He'd grown so effective in the analyst chair that his fighting career started to feel like a footnote. It seemed like he'd found his permanent lane inside the UFC's ecosystem. But just as that picture crystallized, the next chapter arrived, and it would test both his professionalism and his principles. The UFC entered 2020 in remarkable shape. Several of its most commercially explosive events had taken place in the years just prior, with stars like Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Israel Adesanya, and Jorge Masvidal capturing mainstream attention. A landmark $1.5 billion deal with ESPN confirmed just how much the promotion had grown. Then COVID arrived, threatening to bring live sports to a complete halt, and Dana White faced perhaps the most difficult operational challenge in the organization's history. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The UFC hosted events at its own Apex facility and constructed an entire biohazard-controlled environment on a private island in the Middle East, what became known as Fight Island. By any measure, the promotion went to extraordinary lengths to keep the sport alive. For viewers, the most jarring difference was the absence of a live crowd. Without the ambient noise of thousands of fans, the sounds of combat became almost uncomfortably vivid. Strikes landed harder on the ears. Corner instructions could be heard with perfect clarity. Some fights, like Dustin Poirier's 5-round clinic against Tony Ferguson, became almost painful to watch. In that stripped-down environment, everything was exposed. Nothing slipped by unnoticed. And it was in that environment that Dan Hardy's unraveling began. They start now. I know. When Hardy erupted at the referee during one of those empty arena events, the world heard every word. The fight was Francisco Trinaldo versus James Herbert, UFC on ESPN 14, with Herb Dean officiating. In the third round, a heavy right hand from the Brazilian landed flush and appeared to finish the fight on the spot, but Dean allowed it to continue. To make matters worse, this was Dean's second questionable late stoppage of the same card. Hardy's frustration had been building, and this pushed him past the edge. On a purely ethical level, his position was defensible. No one with a conscience wants to see a fighter absorb punishment they don't need to take, and as someone who'd been inside that cage himself, Hardy's reaction came from a genuine place. But there's a clear distinction between a concerned observer and a UFC employee on the broadcast, calling for a specific outcome during an active fight on the organization's own platform is a difficult look regardless of intent. What made it so much worse was the silence. Every word was crystal clear.
The UK keeps terrorizing us. You know, Ireland's part of it, but going back to Ireland too, Scotland. Guy here tonight was asking about Norway.
Germany's one to go.
Germany we haven't been back to. We're talking about, you know, every time we go to Australia, it's insane. So there's a lot of markets that are starved. India, we're going to go to India. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. China, we were talking about tonight too. But we're working on figuring out how to feed all these markets.
This kind of outburst wasn't entirely unprecedented in broadcasting, but it had never been quite so audible, quite so unavoidable. Herb Dean later claimed he'd heard someone call for a stoppage but couldn't determine whether it came from the corner or the ringside physician. Hardy, for his part, made no apologies and stated plainly he'd do exactly the same thing again. With little else happening in the world during lockdown, the clip spread fast. For roughly a week, it dominated the conversation. Nothing happened to Hardy immediately, but Dana White's public comments left little doubt that his standing had shifted. It felt like a target had appeared on his back. The controversy eventually lost steam, but the quiet didn't last. Despite the fallout, the UFC kept him on. The organization's leadership clearly wasn't pleased, yet the broader fan base largely sided with Hardy. Most agreed he could have exercised more restraint, but the sentiment behind it wasn't lost on anyone. A few weeks passed, and it looked like the incident had been absorbed and moved on from. Then, less than a year later, Hardy was gone, completely and without warning. He disappeared from UFC broadcasts and media, cut from both the organization and BT Sport simultaneously. Even his fighter contract was terminated. And no clear explanation was ever made public, at least not one that didn't immediately raise more questions than it answered. Disagreements are part of any business, but being dismissed from the world's leading MMA organization on allegations of workplace misconduct involving a female employee is a serious claim, one Hardy consistently denied. From what reporting exists, the core of the situation appears to have been a conflict with another staff member, but the specifics and the degree to which lines were crossed remain unclear and genuinely contested. For many observers, the termination wasn't solely about that incident. Hardy's conduct during the Fight Island broadcast and his very public refusal to walk any of it back had already made his position precarious. Even so, it's difficult to look at his motivations and find anything sinister. His concern for fighter welfare was real and consistent, which does prompt a harder question. How seriously does the UFC actually take the physical well-being of its athletes?
The UK was going to be a new market for the UFC to really break into, and obviously Bisping was doing incredible things and with the Ultimate Fighter and stuff, but Bisping was always, especially when he was a fighter, seemed to be quite a polarizing character for me, even with the UK fans. Like they liked him, but a lot of people didn't like him. So, and I think the UFC were kind of picking up on that a little bit, whereas I was a bit more, I think that when you liken me to McGregor, I think it's the cheekiness.
Dana White has shown what appeared to be genuine care for fighter safety in certain moments, such as his conversation with Calvin Kattar's corner following the Max Holloway fight, but Hardy pushed back hard on the sincerity of that particular moment. The argument becomes even harder to make convincingly when some of the same figures behind the UFC are also responsible for power slap, a sport built around the deliberate and repeated absorption of brain trauma. And when that conversation comes up, the messaging around head injuries shifts quite noticeably. The full irony of everything Hardy went through is that he did the wrong thing for reasons that were entirely right, while the organization responded correctly in a way that may have been motivated by something far less principled. From the earliest days of the UFC's push into Britain, through years of thoughtful work in MMA media, Hardy was the definition of a company man, until the moment came when he couldn't be anymore. His concern about protecting fighters from brain damage was never anything less than genuine. If you want to explore that subject further, we have a deep dive on CTE and some of the sport's most harrowing stories waiting for you next. Thanks for watching.
And I think because I did the bandana and the mohawk in a time when there weren't as many characters standing out. I mean, for me, it was always Tito with the bleach blonde hair and the shorts, and then obviously Chuck came along. But there weren't as many people that stood out because of the way they looked. Yeah. And I think that helped me gather fans from a big spectrum, you know, but especially the younger fans. They were awesome.
Unwillingness to give up.
I could have fought him 100 times and I probably wouldn't have beaten him more than a couple of 3 times based on where we were skill-wise. That was quite exciting to me because it felt like there was no pressure. All I had to do was do everything I could in the fight, and it may not have been enough. It probably wasn't going to be enough, but there was a piece that came with that, right? Like everybody before the fight said I was going to get submitted in the first round. So I'd already made peace with the fact that if I have to fight with one less limb because he snapped it, then go ahead and snap it. Like, people keep coming back to the armbar that I escaped in that fight. I don't really think it was that difficult to not tap because I already decided before the fight started that I would just punch him with the other arm.
Usually what they would do is they go in, it's called an ablation, they kind of go into the femoral artery and they can burn them out and stuff.
Wow.
But people have that done when they have like symptoms, you know, when they have like palpitations and dizziness, and like people have panic attacks and stuff. I've never had anything, nothing at all. Oh. So what they're telling me at the moment, I mean, I've got to go back and get some more tests done for like a second opinion with a different person. But basically the way I understand it right now is if I want to continue fighting, to get cleared I have to have the ablation. But because I've never had any symptoms and I'm perfectly fine, I don't see the point in letting someone go and start burning my shit.
We talked to him, Lorenzo and I called him last week, and you know, he's got some personal stuff going on right now with his family, but we're going to send him out to literally the best heart doctor in the country out in Los Angeles when he's ready to go, and we're going to get a second opinion, get him checked out.
I'm just not clear to fight at the moment. I'm still training, staying in shape. I'm just proving that I'm able to fight. I'm physically well and able. The UFC have got some other stuff for me to do. I know that they've got some TV stuff that they're interested in me doing, so perhaps a little media training next, and we'll see where that goes.
Whenever you're throwing a left hook, you need to make sure that the elbow's behind the knuckles or there's no support system for the power. So here, he's effectively putting himself in an Americana position. He's hyperextending his shoulder. So there's going to be no power on that because his shoulder joint is going to give before Dillashaw's chin. So Dillashaw takes that punch quite cleanly. Garbrandt's still in range, feels like he's landing punches here, so he's going to invest in another one. Steps out to create a bit of space for his right hand, and Dillashaw beats him to the punch.
How much damage, though, will it be not having it in a live stadium with fans? I mean, atmosphere is key to a sport like UFC. Will it be a much less impressive experience, do you fear?
Yeah, I think that live fans is a big part of any sport. I think it's what makes it so exciting and so fun. The reality is we're in a position now where you can't have fans there. I think people just want to see some live competition. Not only can you hear the punches and the kicks crisp and clear, but you could hear the fighters talking to each other during the fight. You could hear the commentators commentating the fight, and actually the fighters could hear the commentators during the fight. I mean, there were a couple of times where a couple fighters credited Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan. They heard what they were saying, and essentially those guys were like almost cornering them.
Effortless with that.
Oh! What a knockout!
It's not over.
Come on!
It's not over.
Stop the fight!
Ronaldo gets the win by knockout.
That's two.
We have this situation where Herbert's actually doing well, gets knocked down, in my opinion is clearly out, takes probably 4 unnecessary punches while he's out. Trinaldo, for a brief second there, is like, I don't want to keep doing this, but Herb doesn't stop the fight. Hardy's on the broadcast yelling, stop the fight. In the end, he stops the fight after the 4 unnecessary punches. It's very clear that Trinaldo won. It was very clear that Herb was out. And there's even a bit of a, like, I don't want to call it an altercation, but like a moment there where Hardy and Dean are talking to each other.
If you work for me and you approach a judge or a referee or any type of official, I will fire you. You will lose your job. You will never work for me again if you do that. Nobody has the right to, listen, you want to criticize judges, you want to criticize referees, you didn't agree with a decision or things like that. We love Dan, you know, Dan got emotion. And the problem is now, with this setup, it's a lot easier to do, okay? It's a lot easier to interact with everybody, from the fighters to the refs to the media and everybody. If you work for me at any capacity and you approach a referee or judge or an official, I will fire you that night on the spot. That can never happen here ever again.
This is a very dangerous thing to do. If you put on your Superman shirt and decide that you're the smartest person in the room, and smarter than the physician, smarter than the corner who works with the guy, and smarter than the referee, you're doing a chance that you could bring in information that could do the fighter a disservice. I'm looking at the match. I believe I'm getting information from the people qualified to do it. Under no circumstances would I, even as a referee, get up and yell and tell another referee to stop the match.
When he released the video afterwards, which was very kind of nonchalant and like, well, I'm the gold standard of refereeing, so, you know, if you're going to put your Superman t-shirt on, etc., that concerned me, because that means that he's not learning from that mistake and he's going to continue making that mistake. And, you know, if I'm a fighter and I make a mistake, I've got to learn from that mistake, or I'm going to get knocked out or submitted in the same way. Unfortunately, the referees go on and I don't know whether they're held accountable or not, and that's the issue. I understand that the UFC are not going to fire me for shouting up to protect a fighter, but I knew on that day my card was marked, you know, and I knew that my card was marked on that day.
For some time, it seemed like...
I hope it all works out. I do believe Dan Hardy was right in his criticism of Herb Dean. I really do believe that. How he went about it and the time he spent going about it, when he did it, that's the problem between a commentator and the fight itself, where there's supposed to be that barrier.
Do you know how many fights a week I say that to Hunter or Doc Davidson? No interviews, no nothing. That guy goes straight to the hospital, no whatever.
Yeah, no, I've heard you skip post-fight media and stuff like that.
100%. I mean, you guys know how many times that's happened. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. So you don't ever have to worry about me staging anything. And I definitely don't give a fuck what Dan Hardy thinks, you know? Dan Hardy's a guy that was mistreating a woman who worked here, and that's why he was fired. So obviously he's bitter, and I'm assuming that's why he would say something like that.
It was like a trap was set for me. And me being stupid and hard-headed, I'm not going to go, oh yeah, no, I shouldn't have said anything. Herb's the gold standard referee in the world. He never makes a mistake. And even if he did make a mistake, he's got no reason to admit to it. If I'd have said that, maybe I'd be still sitting in my job, but I'd also hate myself. You know, I saw a guy that didn't do his job properly, and I called him out on it.
And the UFC told me to turn my back to him when he came over to me.
He took so much fucking punishment in this fight. I'm freaking out a little bit, man. I don't like it. This reminds me of the kind of the fight where the fight's over and he walks them back and fucking dies. Guys, I want him out of here. Don't talk to anybody and go right to the fucking hospital, man. All right?
The dude was mic'd up. Like, the receiver for the microphone was attached to the camera that was filming him from across the other side of the arena. Like, the whole thing is staged to protect the UFC.
If doctors had their way, there'd be no football, there'd be no soccer, there'd be no boxing, there'd be no UFC. You know, listen, in contact sports, this is a contact sport. Hockey, I mean, we could go on with all the contact sports, that if doctors had their way, they'd say that CTE is a problem.